All right, Black Box Radio. We are at War Memorial Plaza. We're in front of City Hall. The crew got some man downs today. We got man down for Shorty. We got sister down for Yo-Yo. But we got Twan here. Twan and Queen, we in the house. So we got two great visitors today. We have Jason Rodriguez and we have Ray Kelly. So I'm going to let you guys say who you are. Jason, what you do and who are you?
So I'm the director of community engagement and also the IT specialist for the community support program, aka the eye in the sky, or for those who don't really understand the program, aka the spy plane.
All day.
So,
I'll tell you, Ray.
I'm Ray Kelly. I wear a couple of different hats in the city. I'm the executive director of the Citizens Policing Project in Sandtown, Winchester, and I'm also the lead community liaison for the consent decrees monitoring team. So today I'm in the capacity of just Ray from West Baltimore, and
I love it.
no agency, organization.
You're not agency today.
What I say today.
All right, Twan.
I'm Twan, Hope Baltimore, basically spokesperson voice for returning citizens against felon communities and oppression in high-risk communities. Basically like to educate, empower, and liberate.
What does HOPE stand for?
Helping oppressed people excel.
All day, all day. So today the subject is policing in Baltimore and what's going on with policing in Baltimore. So Jason, you know we had to have you because this pie in the sky got everybody like, I'm calling it pie, eye in the sky. This eye in the sky got everybody on they ain't happy. Some people are happy, you know, so kind of tell us where you are with that. You work for them, so I'm sure you in favor. So kind of tell us where you are with that.
So I think a lot of the misconceptions comes from the history of programs like this within our community. We all know CoProIntel. We all know J. Edgar Hoover and, you know, the spying on Dr. King and the attack on the Black Panthers and even the Young Lords. I'm a Puerto Rican, a mixed Puerto Rican. You know, in the Puerto Rican community, we have an organization called the Young Lords. You know, and you know, all these particular groups were targeted. Even folks that were labeled as communists were labeled as communists. You know, were under attack under CoProIntel. Ran mainly by one of his directors, William Sullivan, who basically attacked the black community and went after the black community. So I think we have this history, we have this phobia that's still there from that history of CoProIntel that carries on to today. But what we do is we tell folks we are an evidence collection-based company, aerial evidence-based company. What we do is we take pictures about 7,000 feet, 8,000 feet in the sky. The images are as large as 40 square miles. So really large, 40 square miles.
Wow.
The images, though, when we zoom in, the most that we can see is little blocks and little dots. The little dots represent a person. So we can't see if they're black, white, Hispanic, Chinese. We can't tell if they're male or female. But we're able to, when a shooting or a homicide, or in this case, where there's 4 types of crimes that we evaluate. Homicides, shootings, armed carjackings, and armed robberies. Okay. So when we get a request in from, let's say, homicide, we go to that time in the imagery and we look at that area only. We don't worry about what happened down the street, up the street. We only look at that incident where that crime happened. And we follow those dots and those blips to where they came from, back in time, and where they went to forward in time. It also kind of works in sync with things like the City Watch cameras, because if a crime happens outside of the scope of the City Watch cameras, but happens to pass by a City Watch camera and fleeing, or leaving a crime scene, we're able to see that coordinating time with the City Watch cameras and be able to use the City Watch cameras where they may not even have known, the suspect or witness or whatever had went past that City Watch camera. We're able to kind of lock in that time and pull up that imagery from City Watch cameras and be able to help them build up an investigation so that we can get these murderers and these killers off the streets. That's really about what we do,
Okay. So what's the time that you guys are doing this aerial surveillance? What time?
So normally it's between 8 and 6 p.m. We're locked into a consent decree. I mean, a MOU. I'm sorry.
MOU, okay.
With the Baltimore City Police Department.
Okay.
That codified contract tells us what we can look at, our times of operation. We do have the capacity and the ability to fly at night, but we are currently restricted under our MOU certain hours of operation per
During the day.
Correct.
Because most crime occurs in the evening or at night. So, what particularly is the, what one would say, is it actually helping the city if it's between 8 a.m. and 6 p.m.? Is that a substantial help for what you guys are doing? Or
so when we first came into the city, so we started May 1st. When we first started, the trend actually was there were slightly more shootings in the daytime than there was at nighttime. Now we're starting to see an uptick trend at nighttime. So there are now, for the last 5 months we've been in operation, we're seeing that trend for the first 5 months of the year has now shifted to more shootings at nighttime. But it doesn't rule out that there's still not carjackings during the daytime.
True.
That still doesn't rule out that there's still not armed robberies during the daytime. And it still doesn't rule out that there have been shootings and murders during the daytime as well. One particular case example, so we may not necessarily always be instrumental in, let's say, identifying the murderer. I'll give you a prime example with the bus driver shooting.
Sure.
The community was instrumental in identifying who the person was. But homicide came to us asking for additional aerial evidence that basically, stamped the fact that these were the two at the scene. They were seen leaving the scene, and they were tracked to the house where they were then eventually arrested at.
Okay.
So we were instrumental in providing that additional aerial evidence. What that does is that ensures a prosecution on folks that have committed a heinous act in our community.
Sure.
So sometimes we may not be, instrumental in that daytime shooting. We may not necessarily see the daytime shooting, but there may be other supportive evidence that we're able to help, and in many cases help get that prosecution to make sure that person doesn't get back on the streets again. So, and that's some of the things that we've done.
Okay. That's a good example, because it doesn't say that they could not have been apprehended without your evidence neither.
Correct.
There's always ancillary help, but was that help substantial enough to have that type of surveillance all the time, more than anything?
Correct.
But I'm glad that there was a system, because that was a heinous crime.
Correct. And
All right.
We've been instrumental in over 170 supportive cases like that. And we've
Since
actually
you've been in the sky.
Right. So whether we may not necessarily have helped close the case, but there was information that helped substantiate the case. As far as case closures is concerned, we've helped close over 50 cases with whether it's murders, shootings, carjackings. We've helped close over 50 cases. We're actually closing cases 2 to 3 times higher than without the aerial evidence.
Where's this data?
So
Can anyone get this data? Where's this data that you're saying?
So the initial data that came out was from the RAND report. So what it is, we have 4 agencies that are actually analyzing anything that we do. So whether we even get submitted a case, what's the outcome of that case, whether that case was closed by detectives, whether that case is still pending further investigation, whether we gave supportive information, but the arrest still hasn't been made. And they analyze all those different categories to determine what we have done in reference to those investigations. So Morgan State is one of our partners. They take the data and they analyze the data. Rand Corporation is another one. University of Baltimore is another one. And New York University is also another one. So we had 4 independent auditors looking at that information and determining the effectiveness of what we do when a case is handed to us, if a case is even handed to us.
And the independent, when you say independent, who selected these independent?
So we actually solicited those organizations. We solicited Morgan State because we wanted a historically black college, and we wanted a college that was local to analyze the data. We also chose University of Baltimore, and Rand Corporation, that's what they do. So Rand Corporation looks at data in all kinds of capacities, whether it's criminal justice, whether it's the prison industry, whether it's economics in relation to crime in communities. They analyze data. That's what they do. So we solicited them because we knew that they were experts at analyzing that type of data. And then we chose someone from outside of the area, like New York University, so that we had someone that wasn't necessarily associated with Baltimore necessarily, that could also look outside of the scope, looking in to what we do.
Okay. All right. So we got your side. 'Cause we coming back. We coming back. Ray Kelly. All right. So consent. Baltimore is under consent decree. You're very aware of that. So they added over this pandemic this Eye in the Sky program. How you feel about that?
So let me first say that the Eye in the Sky isn't incorporated in the consent decree. So
it isn't?
No.
Okay.
There is no mandate specific to the spy plane in the consent decree.
At all?
Right.
So this is something outside of that decree?
Yes.
Okay.
So my concern is grounded.
Excuse me 1 second. Right? Just let that pass over.
Yeah.
That's not the spy plane. That's not the
I'm about to say, bruh, what's up with that, bruh? All right, so you said it's not in the consent decree.
No.
And does that mean, how can they produce something that is a policing product if it isn't being under the consent decree?
So right now there's a proposed pilot that's happening, and that puts that outside of, so we don't implement any mandates over specifically the surveillance plane. But if they actually adopt this practice and it becomes a procedure that the BPD use, then my assumption would be that it would have to go through the process of drafting a procedural policy and going before the public for public comment for 30 days. And
would that have to go to the state and all of that?
No, it wouldn't have to go to the state.
It would not.
But
okay.
Every policy that BPD implements has to go through that process.
Got it.
So if this pilot was to be adopted as procedural practice, then it would still have to be presented to the public before it actually becomes procedural policy.
So BPD has the ability to try anything via pilot.
Well, the city has the ability to contract anyone at
any time for policing.
What?
But if they want to institute it, they would have to go through the legislative process and the people and all of that.
So the police department, for their procedural policies, don't have to go through a legislative process. They have an internal process which is overseen by the consent decree.
Got it.
So if they present a new procedure, a new policy, a new training, the public has 30 days to scrutinize.
Got it.
Then they have, all 3 of the parties have to consider that, and then it has to go back to the public again in the second draft to see what that policy or procedure or training looks like before it actually gets presented to the court.
So there's a process.
Oh, yeah.
So within pilot, they're able to continue to do this and go forth and build data, but to go forward, and how long is this pilot? How long is the pilot, Jason?
So it was 6 months.
6 months.
And actually,
and where are we at?
It ends on October 31st.
October 31st is the ending date of the pilot program.
Correct.
Got it. Now, Ray, what do you, as a person who is actually looking at this from a consent decree, from where your process is with being over the consent decree, how do you feel about it?
So I too serve community. So I want to make sure if this is a viable tool to actually take murders off the street, give families closure, I'm all for it.
Okay.
If it works, from what I understood before the pilot, there was no actual proven track record or quantifiable data on how this works. So the city will then have to gauge the results of this pilot to decide if they want to use this mechanism. Which one, that brings up my first concern is it's only flying during the day. What kind of comparative analysis are you going to have to perform to actually see if this is going to be valuable at peak violence times in Baltimore City?
True.
We from the city where it's always an eye in the sky.
All day.
And, we got blue lights shining all up and down Pennsylvania Avenue
All
where I'm
day.
from. And
Yeah.
we used to it. We know they're there. We know. But now you have this added piece, and that just brings in more of that cautiousness of what else is this plane doing up there. So I kind of have questions on this whole 3-plane proposal and the amount of money it costs to
Who's
fly
going to
3
pay?
planes.
Exactly.
Right.
Where does this
So
money come from?
my questions would then come, who else is using this data from this plane? Who owns the data from this plane? Is this data accessible to the public? And then we go, Jason just kind of set another fire under my ass with this whole, we have the ability, we have the capability to fly at night.
Yes, I heard that. Yes.
Where, what capabilities does this plane actually have? And even if the police are only using it for these 4 specific crime-solving initiatives, what are the other people that contract this plane collecting? What extent of technology are they using? Can they afford? They don't have an MOU to not fly at night, do they? What's going on with that? Where people want to know, for one, why not build on the infrastructure that we have, which is part of the consent decree, and there is a mandate to bring the IT component of BPD up to the 21st century.
Yes.
And now they're proposing the investment in this thing, where for me, it just flashes all types of red lights. And that's because for us, we felt like we've been under the microscope for years, and we're not lab rats. What is going on? And if it's only this damn dot on a big old 40-mile picture, then where it's at? Why we can't see it?
Thank you.
And how can the people access surveillance? These are law-abiding citizens now. Access surveillance footage for stuff that happened in their community.
Yes.
So if you now have this mechanism
can
that
you
can
access it?
Pinpoint a murderer that ran 9 blocks, jumped in the car and went down the block. So how come you can't see who broke into Miss Pearl's house? Why she don't get the benefit of all this damn money that
the man
the
that's
city
stealing
is
my
spending?
plants, bruh.
I'm sorry.
Stealing the plants on the front. They need to tell me about the plants.
That's a big thing. I mean, it's some
That's
real
a big
stuff
thing
where
for me.
if this thing actually works, let's end crime. Let's not play with it. That's like selling the cure to cancer. You got the cure to cancer. You're gonna save people lives,
Sell it
or
in
you're gonna have
stages.
an auction and see who can pay the most for
All
it.
day.
If you have this technology that can actually diminish the violent crime in Baltimore City, put that shit on the table so we can use it every way possible.
Let's do it.
We got rapes.
I'm ready for you, Jason.
Guns. We got knives. We got all kinds of open-air drug trade, which leads to all of those homicides. If it's as viable and military as we believe it is in community,
real talk,
then use that shit for us.
For everybody.
Don't just use it to lock us up, because we done already been dealing with a criminal justice system that created this whole environment where we got to scrounge and kill and whatever we got to do to survive. And I'm a firm believer that you can't blame crabs for acting like they do when they're in the burrow.
All day.
It's
and
not,
you create
it's
the
not their
barrel.
natural habitat.
That's right.
So
Yep.
you create this thing where the only viable mechanism a lot of these young black men have is to be out there selling drugs. You let that go so it can escalate and make money off the plane solving murders.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see what's going on before the gunfire.
So you're saying, let's check it out. Let's use this on the micro level.
Damn right.
Because now when the macro level, you want to spend millions of dollars to now surveil. But the problem was lack of opportunity, lack of access, no jobs, education. Why we don't have a pie in the sky for that?
Right.
That's what I really want to know. So Twan, come and bring it down to, you ex-felons. This is gonna lock you up if you committing a crime. We're not saying they're just out there locking folk up. But how you feel about something that's looking at you between 8 and 6 saying, on a 40 square miles, bruh, 40 square miles of watching us every day, bruh, every day.
Like, it's not, this just beginning. This goes way back.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying? This is like the technology age where things have to advance, and it has to advance aboard time. So if you look at Enemy of the State, this is what you're seeing. You know what I'm saying? If you look at Judge Dredd, this is what you're seeing. All this was given to us back in the 80s. Some of us in the street, we adapt ahead and we monopolize and roll with the move. But things are like put up to capsate us. And then like sometimes it's like the money chase becomes where those discussions happen and the real effective is not being questioned. Like I stayed in prison 2 decades. There was always planes flying over the new jail, old jail in Roxbury. There were people jumping off cliffs. There was, you know what I'm saying? So recording been going on. The thing is like how a dude's gonna respond, and like because I did some following on it. You got a billionaire out of Texas who proposed it. They got an article that says like Morgan had to find a grant because Slim said like he wouldn't pay no more because he already paid the 2-3 analysis that he wanted. And
so he wasn't putting no more money in.
He wasn't putting no more money in.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying?
But it's his technology.
Yeah, and then like he's a trade investor for metal. So like I've been following this shit. Like he's a trade investor for metal. So if he got planes, he got metal. So he working out on both ends, and quite naturally gonna wind up having money invested in prison because when lockups come, he gets paid on both sides.
You better preach. you know what?
See, this
you better
shit
preach.
I look at because like
Jason, don't shake your head. We coming for
when
you.
I'm in the streets, right? It ain't nothing against my man.
No, it's not personal. He know that.
Like I gotta look at both sides of the game.
All day.
I gotta look at selling heroin. I gotta look at selling coke.
Yep.
Which one? And if I can benefit off of both of them, then I need to have both of them.
So you saying this brother is a metal? He works for metal.
Yeah, metal investor.
So he's a metal investor. Planes are made out of what? Metal. And then once you lock everybody out, you go to invest in prisons because most people with money
metal in prison.
is metal
All
in prison. Let's be clear. What's in prison? Clank, clank. So what we're saying is he is monopolizing his investment.
And he's a hedge. He's a what you call him?
A hedge.
A hedge funder.
Oh Lord, Jason.
So like,
Twan, put it in your lap.
I'm like, and like you say, like Jason said, like it takes 40 square miles. That is a lot of couple.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? And it's showing dots, but then the camera's on the ground showing a specific area. So I don't know, but I'm saying if it's in Penn North, right? So that means it's taking us from North and Penn
Way
all the way down to Martin Luther King. all the way over
Past
to
that.
Park Avenue.
40 square miles.
So if something happens on Gold Street, you got 1,000 people. So that means 1,000 dots. Now the question early, like, what's computer technology? The cop car, the cameras, all this gonna really show who it is, and if they run in a house that's actually not involved and they got a gun in there, but legally don't nobody know, but they legal to have a gun, but they raid the house and lock them up. But that's not the house. Who's gonna reinvest to put that money back? You ripped and raided my house, you kicked my door off, you come in and you tore everything, because we know how house raids go.
Yep.
We know how house raids go. And then the trauma effect that's gonna be annihilated with the people.
You brought a whole new piece to
This
the
was
game.
all this was all, and then
You gotta think.
traumatizing, like, it's just flying.
Yep.
Yo, what's that?
Exactly.
Like
You
how
hear it
we
all
look.
day long. Yes.
We might not say, like, we made a joke about it,
Mm-hmm.
but traumatically, it made us like, what the hell was that?
Yes. Yes.
And these are the facts. That's
It influenced behavior. And that behavior that you hear this all the time. I mean, it's now that when I work out in the day, and it seems like I hear all day long helicopters, planes. It's like it's no peace. So I don't understand, even if the eye in the sky, what about all of these helicopters going across?
I don't even see birds no more.
You don't even see birds
you used to
anymore.
See birds, seagulls, pigeons.
You don't see anything in the
It's a lot
sky
of
no more. All
eyes
you
in the
see
sky.
is engine.
Eyes, you got eyes for news. You got eyes for the police. You got everybody on a helicopter.
Everybody's
right now
in the
with
air
that
right now,
technology.
all day.
And my question would be then, with the intentional purpose of the surveillance plane, how advanced are the planes using only a fraction of their technical abilities when they flying around?
Do they have can they zoom in? Can they go and look at you for real?
Exactly. They have that type of military state. What was it?
Enemy of the state.
Enemy of the state type technology.
They go
but
right to your
can
face.
if they chose. If the city paid to use that type of technology.
Exactly.
Are they using that? And then it'll be, once again, if you haven't used it, how you gonna prove that works, and how you gonna? It's like a lot that's got to happen in less than 10 days, 5 days.
Yeah,
6
Halloween
days,
is over.
Where I'm curious myself as to what they report. This is the first time from Jason is when I'm hearing that they've actually had positive
Case
outcomes.
Yes.
Which, like I said, I applaud. I'm never going to be the one to say don't solve the crime.
Sure.
And I always know that the police can always lean on, well, we use this to solve crimes, bring murders, all good.
And
what else?
And my thing is, if it's positively affecting right now, and the 31st is over, then they're gonna say, well, you don't want the technology. We had the technology that was positively giving us good numbers. So now you make a case to spend for something that you really don't have, like you said, quantifiable data to say that it's particularly working. Jason, you shake your head, get off your phone, let's do it.
Well, I
Get
had
off.
to write some notes because
Get off.
there was just so much that was
Come on now.
kind of just discussed, and I want to try to make sure that we address every issue. So
Okay.
let's start from the top.
Okay.
So Baltimore is not a guinea pig. This program has scientific white papers that it works. If anybody knows what scientific white papers are, it's a research study as to whether or not a technology, an innovation, a piece of electronic, a piece of hardware works. This is not the first city that we've flown in. We've done missions in Juarez. We've done missions in Dayton, Ohio. We've done traffic studies for stadiums. I mean, so the technology works. If you go to the Persistent Surveillance Systems website, you'll see that there's easily 30 particular locations that we've been at around the globe.
But let me ask you a
in
question. Are
reference
they
to this program.
continuing to use the process, or was it a pilot and then you got...
So in some cases, Dayton, actually, you could say that Dayton was one of the more test cities because it was actually offered to Dayton for free. And actually, Dr. McNutt paid for the program out of pocket to run in Dayton. for a 6-month period. Dayton did not have it within their budget, unfortunately, to pay for at least the operational cost, which is $3 million. So Dayton chose, unfortunately, not to go with the program, but Dayton is a smaller city.
Let me ask a question.
Dayton doesn't have the general budget or funding to support something like that.
So let me ask a question. So you're saying it's $3 million.
That's what it, so that's at cost. So, and what Dr. McNutt has offered to the city.
Who is Dr. McNutt?
So Dr. McNutt is the one that owns the program, not the Arnold. So that's another
That's not the metal guy.
No, that's not the metal guy. So let's start with that. So Dr. McNutt owns the company. It's a private company. All right, it's not a governmental agency because some folks think that it's a governmental arm. The Arnolds are philanthropists. They've been involved in, just recently in Baltimore and in several other urban cities, they actually did an eyeglass program where they funded eye examination and eyeglasses to underprivileged children.
They love
because
eyes.
Because they knew that children...
These folks love eyes, don't they, bro?
Well, it's not so much about eyes.
They want you to see.
They knew that children that cannot see have an issue with learning. And so they want to see children succeed. So they were instrumental in helping that progress of these children that may have issues with their eyes and normally may not be able to get glasses or even eye examinations. That's one. Two, they've been instrumental in bail reform. So they actually are supportive of the no cash bail system. Why? Because the bail system actually affects our community more than any other community. White communities have the ability a lot of times to bail out, to use collateral, property, things like that, to be able to get a bond. But in our community, a lot of times we get stuck for 3 to 6 months, and then a lot of times we cop a plea because we're desperate to get the fuck out. We don't want to stay in there anymore.
Real talk.
So they were instrumental in that. Also, just recently with Meek Mills and Jay-Z, they actually joined the committee that they've actually founded for criminal justice reform. So Meek was actually, the whole Free Meek movement, Meek being, having the issue with the whole probation system and being targeted with the probation system, decided to do something about it. So they actually joined forces with them to actually look at helping and supporting that criminal justice reform.
With all due respect, Brother Jason, I don't want to talk about your money people.
Right. But that has to be
with
talked
all
about.
due respect, I don't give a damn.
Because there was a misconception that they own the program. They don't own the program. They're philanthropists that continue to do work.
Absolutely.
In many
They're
communities.
very involved in this program.
The
And many
concept
social
of
issues.
philanthropy is you're giving your money to
Correct.
support
Sure.
Causes or
whatever
issues.
cause or issue
Correct.
can build community.
Right.
Yes.
But
Now-
philanthropy is based in wealth.
It is.
So
Of
on
course.
the other end of his
course.
pendulum,
Of course.
how does this contribute to his business
course.
end?
Ray
Not
Polly,
his philanthropy.
let's
It's not
tell-
so much.
I love that.
There's philanthropists that get involved in many different issues.
Absolutely,
I'll give you a
but
perfect
most of
example.
wait a minute,
Bloomberg
Jason.
gave $5 million towards the City Watch cameras.
Wait a minute. But
What was his
listen,
benefit?
But what is his benefit? What you saying right now on camera is Bloomberg gave $5 million to
Correct.
City Watch.
Right.
Bloomberg makes money in Baltimore City. He wants the city to be watched.
He wants to be safe at the bottom lines.
I don't know if I say because he's not being affected by the crime.
Okay.
Bloomberg
But
is
his business would be affected.
It's not that neither. What looks good for Bloomberg is his money is being applied and you're saying his name on Black Box Radio's cameras. That's
Right.
good for Bloomberg.
Right.
But we, all due respect, we're not talking about these white guys with a lot of money
Correct.
who say they're helping us. They are a part of this and they are part of, because if you really want to help, and I want to be honest, Jason, then you start building schools. You have job programs. You build schools that actually teach kids trades.
And we do that as well.
But that's what I'm saying. If you
So we
really
get
want to
into the
help the
crux of
black
that as
community,
well.
you don't start in the penal part of
Right.
it. You start in the micro level.
But you have to hold the community accountable where crime is being committed at. You have to.
But
You
we
can't
are-
let murderers go free. You can't not answer a mother's crime.
you
Definitely, we
speaking
can't
that
do
language,
that. We
bro.
can't
You
do
drinking that
But
Kool-Aid.
we also have
You can't.
to. We cannot indict a community, like
Yes.
Twan said.
So we're not indicting
it's
you
a
are.
dot.
But we
If
have
it's
to
a
hold our
dot,
community responsible.
right. But if it's a dot, and now
Correct.
you follow that dot, and like Twan said, you go to Gold and McCullough. Prime example, it's 200 people outside.
all day.
Whatever happened, and they scattered.
Mm-hmm.
So you trying to follow the dot. So even though your intent is to solve this homicide.
Yes.
You got to recognize all the interactions that those other guys
Of
are going
course.
to have with the police.
Yes.
How many of those guys are going to get arrested for bag of weed,
Yes.
or 5 of them sitting out on
Yes.
road?
Well, that's
and
not the case. So we
blend?
don't arrest for bag of weed.
No, but what I'm saying though, Jason,
Conceptual.
Right,
is the
right.
community
Conceptual.
is going to be indicted in this
And trust me, they
program
lock
of
you up
dots.
for
That's
2 bags
not
of weed.
true.
That's
Again,
true.
They lock you up for
so
2 bags of
understand
weed.
something. So we don't look at identifying. We look at tracking a potential witness, a potential suspect from that crime scene. So we don't have. It's totally unbiased. We don't know what the religious background, whether it's male or female, the color of their
But
skin.
dots can collude.
Yeah, that's
But we understand
wait a minute.
that.
We talking
We
about the
understand
science
that.
of. We talking
We
about
understand
science.
that.
We talking
We
about
understand
science
that.
from the air. So dots
We
can
understand
collude,
that.
and when they come together,
Of
you
course.
don't know if one goes one or and if
But
it
see,
scatters.
that's where the detectives come in. So we don't do the investigations.
But
we
they
just provide the aerial evidence.
But then the detectives now
still
have to go in the
out and
community
that's right.
and indict
They
the
still have to-
community.
Not necessarily.
Yes.
Not necessarily. Because just because you see a dot doesn't necessarily make them a suspect. They could be just an innocent bystander. And
But how
people
do you
have
define
How do you
identified.
know when you're
Because
just
that's
dealing
where
with
the
dots?
detectives have to come in at. We don't identify who was standing over that body and popping shots into that body. That's not what we do. What we do is we track everything from the scene. And the police have to identify who's a witness, who's a suspect, who's a car that was just driving down the street and happened to be in the middle of a shooting.
Well, how is
We
the
don't- we
technology viable if you're still dealing with the same humans who cannot do their job on a nominal basis? So you're still dealing with impotent detectives who can't do their job without technology. So you add technology that is not descriptive of the individual.
Correct.
So now the neighborhood is being indicted in this movement of you guys.
That's not.
Am I
that's-
right or am I
Well, I'm saying-
wrong?
No, but see, you got to understand too. It's not just the dots. So, for instance, I'll give you a prime example of a case. So, shooting happens. We're given. Folks say a white Acura left the scene. Well, we're looking for really technically because we were given information a white Acura, and it's easy to identify a white car that goes speeding from a scene at nonstop.
Jason, we talking about
And-
dots.
but that's
going into like gold and McCullough where
Yeah,
100.
because like
Right, because
300
not
people's in
everything
there.
is not necessarily
But most
always
of the-
represented by a dot suspect. That's what I'm trying to tell you. There have been plenty of cases that were identified, for instance, just a car leaving the
I'm
scene.
clear there's going to
that
be
was
outliers.
identified.
I'm clear there's going to be
Right,
outliers,
right.
but what we're concerned about is community, where you say something happens in a community, like say North in Pennsylvania,
Right.
and something happens with all of these people outside. It's like a party, and then everyone scatter.
Right.
How do you follow these dots that could collude and can go anywhere?
Because
and
there's
now the
more
whole community
information
has to
than
be.
just the dots scattered. That's what I'm trying to tell you. Majority of the times when detectives come to us, they're coming to us with just more information than what you're thinking. Hey, look in this area and tell me what you see. It's not like that. They're coming to us with information already. So they're not just coming to us and just saying, hey, go look at these dots at this incident that happened. That's not what happens. The detectives have to come to us with bits and pieces of their investigation that are already started. They've already been at the ground already.
But
They've
these are
already
the
gotten
folks-
information and intel from the ground already.
But do we not know that these are folks who are under a consent decree for their lack
Of course.
of being
so
able
do
to
we
do?
say that the whole system is incapable?
Yeah, so we're depending
Right,
on the
sure.
same
Right,
folk
Right, but are we
to
saying
bring
that
the
system
information
is
who are
so-
in trouble.
But again, are we saying that the system is so broken
Yeah.
that it can't even do a simple job? Like holding
Evidently, they
people
wouldn't be under the
accountable?
consent decree.
But that was then. That was then. We're
They're
talking
still-
about reform.
they're still under
So we're
it.
talking about reform. We're talking about reform.
But
We've all made, look, understand something. I'm a street guy. We've all made mistakes at some point. You know what I mean? As folks that have been engaged
Real
in the
talk.
street.
Absolutely.
But it doesn't mean that I'm not reformable. It doesn't mean that I'm incapable. It does not mean that I'm counted out from understanding the process. You know
I
what
have
mean?
more thoughts on yes, that can happen to you as a street guy. But
Of
these
course.
detectives, they're not going to jail. Their families are not being disrupted. They don't live in Baltimore City.
understand that.
So
But you have to
let me
remember that
finish. Let me
things have
finish,
to be
Jason.
without
For their
reason,
behavior,
without, right.
there's no indictable response.
Right.
The response comes from the community. So it's hard for me to be able to take you as a street guy who can finally see that I did wrong. I'm changing myself. Then these detectives who have no They have no vested interest in our community, our people,
Right.
our young people. They come in the community and they're exasperating the process
But they are
with their
trained to
behaviors.
do a job.
Right,
And
they are
that
trained.
job is to carry out an investigation.
We
And
know-
again, you have to remember
are they doing
the
that, bro?
investigation doesn't just stop there. You got to remember that once it's given to the prosecutor has to decide whether to move forward. So if something is too out of place, that's one check and
But
balance.
we know how
then
these
the other check and
prosecutors are
balance
best friends
is
with
a
the
defense
cops.
attorney. A defense attorney is going to knock down anything that may not necessarily, and that information, you got to understand, that information that we collect, that's given to the detectives, is also scrutinized and analyzed by defense attorneys. So anything that we provide has to have a cooperation to it. So for instance, prime example, I told you, a case comes through with a white Acura. We track that white Acura past, let's say, a City Watch camera. Now not only do we have the white Acura, but we also have the City Watch camera that shows the white Acura flying through.
But
We may also see them stopping at a gas station before the incident happened.
Wait a minute,
And you
Jason.
got now the information that's given to the detectives, they go back and they get the information from the gas station
Got it,
camera.
got it. I
so
hear
they're
what you're
able
saying.
to build their case.
Yeah, I
It's
understand
not
what you're
simple
saying.
and cut. It has to be a case that's built.
Jason, we get that, but we're
Right.
you talking about a case that moves away from a community. My issue is the black community.
Correct.
And having these dots and putting dots together and how they collude and depending on the same folks who have been the issue in our communities is my issue.
Well, we're not
So,
depending on the same folks.
The detectives?
Because the ones that are bringing the aerial evidence to the detectives are community folks. So there's over 35 analysts that are from the community. Actually,
what community?
From Baltimore community. Our analysts, so we don't have law enforcement inside our
What
center.
community?
Our Baltimore community. We have folks that are from Sandtown, Winchester. We have folks that are from Park Heights.
Well, we need to see that because I don't know any folks working
We
for
have
you guys that I
35
know.
We have over 35 analysts that work at our center.
Are they black?
Yes, they are.
All right.
Yeah,
And most of them, this is their first time job. Most of them are young, because you need young eyes, really and truly.
More
You gotta
eyes.
do-
Y'all love eyes in that spot.
You need
Y'all
some young
love
eyes.
eyes.
You need some
Let's-
young
let's-
eyes.
let's
What's
go and
up
get
with
that
these
off.
eyes, Jason?
Young eyes like mine.
Eyes, glasses,
I need glasses.
sky.
That's right. I need
I'm like, this
glasses,
eye
you
thing
know.
is something going on.
You know.
I think they in the eye business.
Right.
All right, Ray.
Twan been trying to inject.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
you know,
Come
like,
on.
that was one of the questions that I wanted to know. You know, like technology, and we know reform hasn't happened for our youth because there's nothing there, there's nothing being done.
Right.
And I know myself from experience. It was a police department that shut all the rec centers down. You know what I'm saying? And that's what
not true. It was
drove
a
me.
mayoral office
That's what
that
drove
closed it
me
down.
to selling dope.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Because the Warners got closed by the police.
Right.
And I went to selling dope.
Right.
But
Right.
like,
You talking about the PAL program?
like
And that was
my thing.
that was under Stephanie Rowland Blake
My thing is.
Jason.
My thing is.
and
Like,
Sheila Dixon.
my thing is. How?
I
do
know my
we-
son was a product of PAL.
How do we
sick
get
of
a kid that comes out of high risk family, high risk community, into learning this technology, working it, being trained, so later on as this grows, if it grows, when it grows, how it grows, that literally he can say, they took me from a
Oh, yeah.
young age and coached me all the way through, and now I'm a part.
Right. We have
of
over
this.
35 analysts making $21 an hour. Many of them, this is their first job. Black brothers and sisters right from some of the most hardest hit communities as far as violence is concerned.
No one
That
knew
was
that.
one of the buybacks of the program.
Well,
And
I'm
that's
just
another
learning
thing
that.
too.
Just learning that.
By having us in the program, I keep trying to tell folks, you know my moral fortitude. I'm one of the founders of Cop Watch. Before there was Cop Block and many of these organizations, we founded an organization that was telling folks to film the police. Before phones made it readily available to do so, we were encouraging people, get you an 8mm video camera from the store and keep that in your car and film the police engaging with young men on the streets, basically holding them up, interrogating them, no probable cause, no reasonable suspicion, and encouraging people to do that. We were doing that almost 11 years ago, 12 years ago. We were standing up for families like before Freddie Gray, before Tyrone West. There was Anthony Anderson, people like William Torbin. We protested at Greg Bernstein's house, at the state's attorney's house, and stayed at his house all weekend long with helicopters and SWAT teams thinking we were going to do something to the state's attorney. So folks know my moral fortitude. I've always been a person of police accountability. And what I can say to the community is, this is a community-based program. Majority of the folks, besides Ross McNutt, who is the owner of the company, majority of the folks that are in the program are from Baltimore City. Marshall Bell, from Baltimore City.
But the question is,
me,
do they own...
from Irvington.
But
most of these analysts, 35 analysts, are from Baltimore City.
okay.
So they have a vested interest in what they do. And what I tell the community is that we are the eyes and ears. You best to believe there's not enough money in the world. See, I got to go back into the streets. I got to go back into my community. So there's not enough money in the world if I saw something that was out of place or out of line that I wouldn't go back to the community, because I know the community is going to support me at the end of the day. That corruption or whatever I saw there is not going to support me in the future. But if I saw something that was out of place or out of line, like for instance, the discussion of data, the data is not for sale. The data does not go out to anyone else. The data is protected. As a matter
By
of fact,
whom and where is it? Why
So-
can't we access it?
so the thing is, you have to remember too, these are criminal investigations that are being built. Now there are ways that the community can access it.
But only
you have to have
but
a
why
case
is the
number.
data just for
You have to have a
murders?
case number and a lawyer.
But we have more problems in our community
Correct.
than murders. We like
and we want it. Don't get me wrong. We want to do more. We have the capacity to do more. Like for instance, illegal dumping. Like for instance, silver alerts and amber alerts. We have the ability to
break-ins.
Break-ins, B&Es.
trafficking,
But you have to
Human
understand that this is a
trafficking.
pilot program.
Why can't
Right,
you?
right.
We got children
So-
being
Right, so
trafficked on
understand,
this water.
This is a pilot program.
I understand, but
And
we
what
have
the
so many.
commissioner.
The first thing that I
Right.
always see when it comes to pilot and policing is about locking people up.
Correct.
And that's my question.
That's
And we
my
have-
issue.
we have-
wait a
we
minute,
can do
Jason.
more, like
Jason,
even-
wait a
right,
minute,
right,
because
right.
you know what?
Right,
I'm gonna put
right.
you on Black Box Radio because you bad, bro. But wait a minute.
Right.
My problem when I see anything about pilot and helping the community of Baltimore starts with the penal system and and
Right.
criminality.
Right.
But there is so much. You got children going off of this water.
Of course.
All day long. You got women. It's more women now dying in
Sexual
Baltimore
trafficking.
City than ever.
Right.
In history. We
Right.
have all of these ancillary issues that are powerful,
Correct.
and all they really focus on is murders and criminality for jail.
Right.
Which the onset is jail, but children are, we can't find children.
Right.
We can't find young black girls. We can't find Miss Gold being
Correct.
somebody coming up in her house.
Alzheimer, folks walking off.
We can't find none of
Right,
this.
right.
We can't find drugs.
Correct.
Open air drug markets everywhere, like
Right.
the brother said. Why are we not focusing on those type of issues that take you to criminality?
Right. So we want to do more.
But why
But you
isn't it
have to
start there?
Because so you have to understand that you have to go back to Commissioner Harrison. Commissioner Harrison is the one that codified the MOU with us and said, these are the 4 crimes I want you to look at. We've been fighting them the whole time because we know we can do illegal dumping. We know that we can do amber alerts and silver alerts. We know that we can do much more. There's been crimes that we know that were sitting in the imagery that we could go after, but we can't go after. We may have heard it in a news story. We may have heard it from what's the Citizen app going off. We may have heard of these other things going off, but because we're under an MOU and they're only going to investigate these 4 things, that's what we have to adhere to right now.
Right.
But we want to do more. And
Wait a minute, Jason.
Right.
Wait a minute. Okay.
How then do you convince the people that even though I work on the monitoring team, I live and breathe on Pennsylvania Avenue where I know it's still the same. So
Yes.
how do you convince us that this is not a technologically advanced method of inducing more street sweeping,
Yep.
drag nets, profiling, and just injections into the criminal justice system overall, when all of it is, like Queen said, leading to arrest.
That's
it's about
what-
enforcement.
It's all
And
about
that's
putting
something
people
we
in jail.
understand
That's
is-
my problem.
And again, our whole argument from the beginning, when we were in the process of codifying the MOU, was that we wanted to do more. There are so many things that we are capable of doing, quality of life issues, that we know that could be a benefit to our city. the problem is that this is only what Commissioner Harrison wanted to move forward with.
But
you have to remember,
who came to you guys and said we want the eye in the sky? Was that the commissioner? Who started this process? Or the mayor? Who started the process?
Dr. McNutt presented the idea to the city. But again,
they had to have an opening. Somebody said, "Come present." Dr. McNutt just did knock on the door and say, "I'm coming to present."
Right. So well, we've had over 70 meetings throughout the city, and it presented to City Council. But it was Commissioner Harrison that said, "Okay, I'm willing to look at this new technology. If you claim that this new technology is able to help close cases, is able to go after murderers and shooters, let's see it work at this capacity." And we were willing to accept that MOU so that we can show that, hey, this is a simple thing. These 4 crimes, we actually can do more. We can fly at night, not when we don't have infrared. Just with our cameras, we're able to see the street lights, see the cars moving with the lights on it. We're able to track with just normal cameras. So it's no special military technology. There's no infrared. Doesn't see inside your house.
I got cameras. They can't take 40 square miles. So these are wait a minute.
But what it is, it's actually, so it's 12 cameras in an array.
Okay.
So, and it builds up. So it's 12 megapixels each camera.
Okay.
There's 12 of them. It makes up 92 megapixels.
Okay.
So it's basically a big box of cameras.
Yeah, it's not regular.
Right. No. It's not regular. It's engineered. I mean, Dr. McNutt is an MIT engineer.
I'm sick of Dr. McNutt.
No, I'm just saying. When you ask about technology, you know what I mean? So, but you got to remember, we can't be afraid of certain technologies. Now, I would be afraid if there were government agents operating the operations center.
No, but let me tell you why I'm afraid.
Right.
The reason why I'm afraid is because criminality is the effect.
Right.
And I never see them create something to go after causes.
Right.
Put money in it, $3 million, put that in neighborhoods. Pennsylvania Avenue has decayed over 20 years, but they got the new East Harbor.
But that's a policy issue there.
But
that has nothing to do with us.
It has something to do because let me tell you why it does. Because the end is criminality. The beginning,
the end is holding people accountable.
Jason, wait a minute. The end is what we see. That's the effect. Criminality, people killing each other, all of the things going on. But what we need is the micro level. Invest in neighborhoods, invest in children, have trade schools, change neighborhoods, infrastructure. None of that. No, it's no eye in the sky for that.
Correct.
But as soon as it's time to lock people up and put them in jail, we can find the technology to make it happen. That to me is why that's why we're afraid.
I hear you. Don't get me wrong.
What you think?
If you go look at my social media feeds, if you go look at my live feeds, I talk about everything from the lead, affecting the prefrontal cortex, how lead can be genetically passed on from parents,
sure.
To disinvestment of communities, disenfranchise of communities, you know what I mean? You go to my social media feeds, for 10 years, I've been talking about social economic injustices, the school to prison pipeline. We know all these things, but that stuff is ratified there. See, the failed policies of these administrations is why we see decades upon decades of blight, disenfranchisement,
but
all of that comes from them. But
I'm clear that, but you can go after that. You can have decades of anything.
We haven't gone after it because the same policies are still there.
I think a big problem with what the people have with this whole concept is we're in the midst of reform. The spirit of reform after the federal government said that we've been mistreated and oppressed for 50 years.
Absolutely.
So now that we enter this era of reform, why are we not investing in reform? Why does the new money go to more enforcement?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
That's where I'm at.
But the new money is not going there because, again, this doesn't cost the taxpayer anything for 2.5 years.
It will.
But we haven't even crossed that road yet.
Yeah, but we're going to cross it.
We haven't crossed that road yet. And again, I understand the reform. Don't get me wrong, Queen. I understand reform. Again, I built an organization. Because we got to have reformative measures before we have penals. I testified against multiple police commissioners coming into this city, including Dr. Batts, who was a domestic violence accused of domestic violence. So You know, I remember the Gun Trace Task Force when they were out there in the streets. Even going back even further, the Flex Squad, officers like Spinato, Sergeant Gerzak, Officer Murphy. You know what I mean? Like, I watched these people, and for years would file complaints and go to City Hall and speak. I remember when Brandon was an intern for Stephanie Rowland Blake, and I was speaking to Brandon about bad police officers in Southern District. So nobody understands this reform thing. I'm telling you, I've lived in Brooklyn homes that have seen it being stopped coming out of my house. And when I ask them, why am I being stopped? Oh, because you're in a high crime neighborhood. And I say, well, I don't have a problem with my neighborhood. You're labeling my neighborhood as a high crime. He says, well, maybe you should move out. And I tell him, I ain't moving nowhere. This is my neighborhood. This is my home. I don't have a problem with my neighborhood. So I've lived this and been there. I understand about reform, but at the end of the day, we gotta have accountability. And not only just accountability.
That's your word, bro.
But listen, not only accountability,
Love that word.
but accountability in all levels. I'll give you a prime example.
Wait, before your prime example. Wait, before your prime example.
Like the 4 charges, right? Armed robbery, carjacking, and shooting and murders. But actually, they are just one charge. Because if you get a shooting, if you carjack somebody with a handgun, you're gonna get a robbery armed.
Correct.
You're gonna get a robbery. You know what I mean? We from the streets, we know that.
Correct.
If you shoot somebody and potentially on critical or die or whatever, then you're gonna hit a homicide.
Correct.
Also with the shooting. So my thing's like, how is they breaking down into 4 charges?
So they're not
same?
4 charges, they're 4 types of investigations. That's how they come in under CAD. So when it's reported, it's not reported man with a gun. It's reported I was in my car and the man made me get out my car with a gun. That's a carjacking, armed carjacking. We can't even look at carjackings if somebody just took your car and you left your keys in there. We can't even look at them. We can only look at certain cases. Same
the
thing
cases that's going to take you to jail.
Right. When shooting,
carjacking is you snatch somebody.
Right, you snatch some. Right. Armed is when you brandish something.
Sure.
You know what I mean? That's different. But these are cases that come in through CAD.
So let's circle back to this accountability. Let's circle back to accountability.
Yes.
Because this whole consent decree is based on years of asking for accountability.
Yes.
So we understand that you kill somebody, you should have to pay the penalty for committing a homicide.
Correct.
We get that. You know what I mean? That's all good. But then who is being held accountable once again for the situation that put these people in these communities in that situation? So once again, we trying to backdoor arrest our way out of it. And
of course.
That's not what the consent decree was all about. And we got to keep circling back to that. Damn, this money got to be invested better.
Yeah, and you create the environment, and then you say that the neighborhoods and the people should be accountable. But the creation of this environment comes from, like you said, City Hall, the police department. That is why we in a consent decree, because of oppression. So you can't tell the people they have to be accountable when you guys aren't accountable, and you keep creating these pilot programs.
We don't just hold.
But wait a minute, Jason.
Right.
You keep creating outside of the. You're so strategic where you create outside of the consent decree something else to watch criminality than to deal inside the consent decree, and let's really document and do this together and reform Baltimore. No, we want to go with the billionaires and McNutt and Daddy Meadow and say, let's start this something else, and because it holds us accountable, which are the people. That's my problem.
Well,
is
what
about the accountable for the people who created the criminality? Where's that accountability? We never have an eye in the sky for City Hall, for Harrison and his boys. There's no eye in the sky for them. What is the eye in the sky for them?
So we're not just accountable for murders and shootings, but we can hold, again, this is an unbiased information that's collected. This is not.
But I'm talking about what they are paying you guys for.
I'm gonna give, not
what you can do.
We have the ability to do either or.
Well, okay, but we want to talk about what you're here to do.
So for instance, we can hold the streets accountable as well as law enforcement accountable. Well, I'll give you a prime example.
But it's not going to us.
Let me give you an example. There was a young man that was arrested. All right. The probable cause was that he had drug activity out of his house, that there was high amount of traffic in the affidavits that served the warrant. The young man knew that he didn't have that kind of traffic at his house, what they were talking about. His defense attorney asked for the information from the program. He was vindicated. Why? Because it only showed 2 people all day came to his house.
My understanding was there are 4 things that
Correct.
this thing is enforcing.
Yeah.
That's
And
enforcing.
now we're talking about a case where a young man had traffic in and out of his
Correct.
house.
That had nothing to do with the 4
Correct.
things.
That had none of
So
those
that's
4
under the MOU as far as 4 cases. But what our program has the potential to do is to vindicate the innocent.
So let me just
To
ask you
hold
straight
the
out.
system accountable.
So let me ask you straight out. Are y'all
and to
doing
convict
also
the guilty.
contract work while the pilot is happening? Are y'all contracted for certain things while the pilot is happening? Are y'all still
You
doing
have to if that
No.
defense attorney.
side contract?
Well, how did he get that
No.
information?
No. So
Right,
again,
how is that information readily
because that
available?
information, because we briefed the public defender's office, we briefed the Maryland Monumental Bar Association, we briefed half the defense attorneys in Baltimore City, letting them know that this information is there for them. Also, this has the ability, as I said, to hold the system accountable. Because if we were flying, we'd have known exactly what happened to Detective Suter. That
We
he
know
was
what
possibly
happened.
Killed.
They
But
killed
again,
him,
but we would have been able to hold them red-handed right there with the aerial information.
We
that
knew
had.
what was happening.
Not only that,
That's something that I have always said. They picked a prominent place where they knew
A black police,
police
yes.
thieves had.
Of course.
Yes.
Of
Because
course.
before that area was houses, that was George Street.
yeah,
Yep.
yeah.
That's where police got killed in the 70s.
Yeah.
With the associated people who claim they Black Panthers, Eddie Conway, and
Sure.
you know what I'm saying?
Right.
People like that years ago. But the thing is, why did they pick that particular area
You know
to
why.
do the hit?
You know
And
why.
then made it like dudes in the street put a hit on.
Right,
Yeah.
right. But we would have
That
been
was
able to
a-
hold that accountable. We would have been able to.
I don't know
I'm
what
telling
they
you, if we
Jason.
were up and flying, you wouldn't have been able to escape that.
It would have
You would not be able
never
to
have
escape that.
gotten to the people.
But
Oh,
that would
it would have. Trust
but-
me. So again,
Jason.
you got to understand that the information that we have, again, is not something that we're going to keep from someone. If there's something there that's going to corroborate someone's innocence, if there's information there that's going to hold law enforcement accountable for their actions, we have no other choice. And again,
I just
as
cannot
community
believe-
representatives in that program, you best to believe if I have even heard of a conversation, I'm in all the briefings and meetings. If I have even heard of something going down like that, you best to believe I'd be calling you and we'd meet right in front of that building and we'd be having Black Box Radio right in front of that building.
Jason, you're a staunch
So-
advocate.
No,
I
serious.
just don't know.
Look, serious.
I just don't believe
It's not
in
about
any
an advocate. I
system.
believe in the technology, but I also believe in accountability of our own actions. And I also believe that us having
But you never said
firsthand
accountability for the
inside-
people who created our actions.
But-
Where's
but
their
I understand-
accountability?
I
And
I
that's
go
a
to
real
City
thing.
Hall all the time and
That
fight
ain't
for
City
that.
Hall. I'm
I go
talking
to
about.
City Hall all the
I'm
time
not
and
even
fight
talking
these
about City Hall.
politicians.
I'm talking about the Manuts and the
Right.
Bloombergs. I'm
But
talking about your
But
boys.
we got McNutt. We got him.
No,
we got him.
we talking
You know
about the
why?
Metal Boy.
Because
We talking
we're
about all
able
of
to
them.
take him and do additional work. Like for instance, have 35 analysts that had no computer skill sets at all, get them certified and recognized by the state
I like that.
as apprentices.
I like
We're
that.
working on a pilot's program to be able to bring black men and women and teach them how to fly planes, because we represent 3% of the industry. We're looking at doing additional work with like STEM programs and robotics and things like
But-
that.
but
These
that
are the
hinges-
buybacks that, because we're involved
can I
in
say
it,
something?
we have the ability to.
But that
to have
hinges
control of.
on the penal system, though. It still hinges on locking up our people. So yes, you're gonna create this, but it still hinges on you still pushing people into a system that is ruining our families.
But we can't.
So that,
we
to me,
can't
that's a problem.
We can't escape the bad choices that we make. In
But we
reference
can't
to
escape
murders,
the setup for the
in
bad
reference
choice.
to murders and shoot. But again, that still doesn't justify the action.
It does.
No, it doesn't, because
You have
because
no
at the end of
other
the day,
action.
We have free will,
No.
and we know better.
That's
we
not
know
true.
better. Our
So I'm gonna
community
ask
knows
Jason, it's
better.
not true.
Our
This-
community
If
knows
you create a barrel and
This
put a
is
crab
not-
in it,
nah,
you
this
can't
is
fault
the
him to come out of
question
it.
of all
So
of
we
it
can't.
is-
So we can't. You're making it seem like we can't have
got to introduce
accountability.
yourself.
We can't have accountability for homicides and shootings in our community.
Right, but think,
I mean,
think,
that
this,
doesn't make
this isn't
sense.
perpetual. So let's think back.
We know the
we,
problems.
We only have to go back to 2014 to see 100 less murders. That's 6 years. So there was a mechanism in place that was working until the riots and the unrest. Now, because the oppressive treatment of our communities for decades is identified and mandated to reform, like she said, now there's a new mechanism to perpetuate that same type of engagement with that criminal justice system under the auspice of accountability.
Absolutely.
When really nothing has been invested in undoing those root issues
Absolutely.
that cause the poverty that leads to criminal activity that is documented as well, white papers forever, and that's a real thing.
All right, Black Box, you back in. You back in the lab. So Jason, all right, so we ended over there. We're talking about, because you keep telling us accountability for the community. But we got to talk about accountability for the folks who set the community up to this criminality. People don't just become criminals. This is a process. So we want to kind of build out on that just a little, because we keep talking about how accountable citizens should be, but not accountable for the systems and all the things that make citizens result to criminality. So we're going to introduce this young man. Who are you, young man?
My name is Carday Cornish.
Okay, Mr. Cornish. So what do you have to say about this subject, since you're sitting here with us? Talk to us.
I forgot where y'all left off. You was over there.
We're talking about the eye in the sky and accountability for the citizens, and how when they create new programs, they create it around criminality and making people accountable and putting them in the penal system.
Right.
When I think they should create programs to invest in the neighborhoods, invest in people, so they don't become criminals. So I never see that creation. So that's what we were kind of expounding on. What is accountability at this point? Is it just on citizens, or is it on systems too? And city government and the police force and all of that?
Gotcha. So I got an idea for a program that I want to start, and it's how is that program going to be used to not just hold people accountable, but assist people out of poverty, instead of creating systems that perpetuate poverty or just monitor.
Got it. What's the name of your program?
Fatherhood.
What's the name of it?
Fatherhood.
Yeah. Fatherhood. Fatherhood is a beautiful thing, right?
Yeah. That's,
Okay.
I mentioned to a guy earlier, that's kind of the only way you break the cycles. You got a lot of fatherless children who have grown up and now become fatherless adults who are parents of children. And they haven't been guided on how to even be a father. From that angle, you got a system being perpetuated, just a lack of oversight and accountability on that end. There's a lot of things that can grow out of that. Mistreatment of women. You don't teach a little boy how to respect a woman growing up, but he doesn't see a man respecting a woman growing up. Leads to criminality. Need them fighting
Domestic
on
violence.
his girlfriend.
Real talk.
You don't even have to see that going on in the home. It could just be a lack of education on relating to the opposite sex. For young men who grow up in households with only one parent. If there's only one parent, you're not seeing a healthy interaction between two individuals. When you go out and invest yourself into a situation with another person who may not have had two individuals in their home, how do you coexist with that person? When you get frustrated,
you're talking about the root issues that we said, that there's micro root issues that equals criminality.
Right.
That the onset starts in the micro or the root issue, and that's never addressed by the city or the state. It's always accountable for the citizens to go to jail or penal or some process in locking people up than to really deal with root issues. And I understand what Jason said, they could do so much more.
Right.
But we don't need an eye in the sky for the problems in Baltimore. We need reinvestment into the people and into neighborhoods and into schools, into programs. We need PAL centers. We need job programs. We need schools that teach trades. We need a lot of things that address root issues that make people better people, so they don't become criminals. People, if you have a barrel and you create a few opportunities, people are going to fight to get to those opportunities. That's what becomes this crab in the barrel. Someone creates the barrel. If there's an opportunity for everyone, you never have a barrel.
So in my neighborhood,
That's how I feel.
Probably about, I'm going to say at least 25 people around my age, between 25 and 35. And if you bring a program into the community for those 25 people, and only 4 of them show interest, how do you develop interest in them to even take advantage of certain programs?
The four is better than 0. So if those 4 show interest, they're going to show that other 8, 17, or 10, listen, they're in the same place as me, and look at them ascending. Sometimes you have to see it before you become a part of it. So those 4 are important.
I'm 29 now.
Okay.
And I think I was about 19 going on 20 when I started doing photography. By way of me starting to do photography, I started with a bunch of wonderful people. Like Baltimore opened his arms to me when I started doing photography. I ended up shooting for one of the city's councilmen. I ended up doing a couple of political campaigns just as a photographer. And even at the time, I had friends who I would try and get interested in like what I was doing. Not necessarily because I wanted them doing like the same thing I was doing, or I was trying to force them into it, but just like, look, bro, there's another way. Like, you could be helping me out. Now, today, I just do it with my son. Like, I model it with him. A lot of these programs, even in their conception, they haven't been modeled yet. So I'm a part of a group of fathers called Dads United organization, where we model behaviors. We try and create an interest by being there, using visibility to create change.
I love that.
You can bring 10 programs into the community, but if nobody takes interest in it, and it's funded, money will be mismanaged.
Yep.
That's all I know.
Absolutely.
You can give $100,000 for a program and say, we're going to make sure people get to and fro, they're going to eat, they're going to get a uniform, and the program is for 10 people. We have enough funding for the next 30 days. $100,000 is going to cover 10 people. $10,000 per participant.
Yes.
They can get paid, but if 2 people show up a week, or 2 people show up a day.
What I can say is when people are broken, they have broken steps. So you cannot look at numbers. If you affect one person, you're changing a generation. You don't look because there's 10 and you only 2 show up.
Right.
You pour into that 2.
Right.
Because that 2 is 2 generations that's going to change a whole lot of people. When people are broken, it's very hard sometimes for them to access things that make them greater. They have broken steps.
Right.
So we can't look at the numbers of who shows up. We deal with who shows up.
Right.
You get what I'm saying?
And I think
that's what I'm at.
I think this whole thing that we're talking about is that type of strategic investment. So just like Carde's saying how they don't invest in those types of programs, but invest in law enforcement assistant diversion or something like that. That's the same problem people have with the spy plane, is the fact that we have 350 murders. In concept, the police department feels is so many murders, we have to invest in more advanced technology to get ahead of this, instead of lowering crime and not enforcing the law.
I would say, piggybacking off of what Brother Jason said, when I started doing photography, that's something, before I started doing photography when I graduated high school in 2010, I took interest in the military. I didn't see anything else being modeled around me other than people selling drugs. I took interest in the military because I wanted to fly planes. All my life, up until the point when I was like 18, I had never seen anybody fly planes outside of like on TV. I had never been on a plane. I never met a pilot. So I thought that was the only way I could ever fly planes in life. Like, my mind was just that limited because I hadn't seen it. When I picked up my camera, it was almost shunned, like, by my friends, that I was doing something different. Like, it was weird to them. But I seen, I had gotten locked up when I turned 18. They said it was a covert operation. I didn't know what that meant then, but when I realized just the power of the camera that I had when I got into photography and how I could see a block away, I quickly understood what a covert operation could lead, how a covert operation could lead to an arrest. I see a lot of opportunities in the program, like community, the CSB. I see it. I don't think many people will, because of what we've been through. We're seasoned in traumas of our relationship with the police and our relationships with politicians.
I understand the trauma with that relationship, but I just think the start is always in dealing with the effect. If I ever see the focus and the start on the cause, then I'm with that. And I don't see that with the Iron Sky. I see
those two.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is, what I'm seeing is
I've heard
they're dealing with the effect.
We have to focus on who we can get.
Absolutely,
Okay?
but still.
Now listen.
You can't just wait a minute, bro. We cannot we can't arrest ourselves out of this. We have to build ourselves into it.
We got to figure out how do we create a general interest amongst that population.
No, I'm talking about.
And there's some that are not going to be
interest in
reformed like that. I know some knuckleheads that I deal with engagement all the time. Just right in my neighborhood in Irvington, that are pilled up, messed up, and they ain't trying to hear no old heads, no young heads. They ain't trying to hear nobody. And these are killers. These are killers.
I've got
or
friends.
potential killers.
Not on camera. We want to stay on.
But I still go out there and I still try to outreach, to them and still try to get them to get into some programs, because I've been doing this easily, like I said, over a decade. I was one of the first ones before all this defund the police thing. You go back and look at my videos, I was talking about taking 5% of the public safety budget each year and reinvest that back into the community each year, just 5%. We spend almost over a third, in some cases cities 30 to 40% of their general fund goes to public safety.
Yes.
I made a proposal to Stephanie Rowland Blake. Like I said, I've been doing this for multiple administrations. I made a proposal to Stephanie Rowland Blake to put 2 social workers in each of the 14 policing districts. Why? Because most of the issues that police engage with every day are social related issues, are social welfare issues, are issues that have mental health or mental behavioral issues, or there are issues with substance abuse, alcoholism, things of that nature that eventually leads to domestic violence or beefs or skirmishes and things of that nature. So if a police comes out and sees something that may be out of line, that really and truly is not a policing issue, I shouldn't be involved in, that's when the social workers come in and do the outreach and try to provide the wraparound services and try to strengthen that family and give the supportive needs to that family. I've been talking about this for years, about making sure that we have, in some cases, we don't have mentors for young black children that are growing up. So what ends up happening a lot of times, these children do what they see in the household. So if they see chaos inside that house and they don't see a strong figure inside that house, if we have the ability, they grow up with a dysfunctional mentality. But if there's a way that we can put a mentor or a tutor or somebody in there to help strengthen that child as that child continues to go through school, he becomes successful and doesn't get involved in the school to prison pipeline.
That's if they grow
Well, I just go ahead.
These are frontline investments.
Like all that they talking about. You know what I'm saying? I grew up one-sided. Streets became my mentor. You know what I'm saying?
Me too.
Stayed in prison 2 decades. Used drugs since the age of 12, heroin, all that. But what I'm doing today, none of my homeboys seen it. And when I started, they was like, yo, you stupid. That shit ain't working. You dumb. But I focused, like she said, I hand selected who I wanted. Over the past 3 years, I helped over 150 guys. You know what I'm saying? Dudes got housing jobs, they good. Dudes in the hood now see, like, yo, would you, and then putting faces together. You know what I'm saying? Cause like when we over west, when dudes see like, hey, man, I know you new car. Yeah, shorty good people. You know what I'm saying? When dudes see me, Ray Boom, and whatever. But like you say, that there's a lot of things, that infrastructure, that money could be invested into. And it's dudes in the hood that were the best basketball coaches, that were the best football coaches. They were the best that solved beefs on intimate. Like I always say, that, like when we was dealing with ceasefire with the gun violence, and I said to them, it ain't the police that can stop dudes from I can get more guns from a dude on the street than y'all can. You know what I'm saying? Because the trustworthy of who I am.
Exactly.
You know what I'm saying? Yo,
Some of
give
the
me the
bonding
strap.
has to go through the
you
community.
get a job,
Yes.
and you ain't got to worry about the strap no more. He ain't got to know it came from you or none of that.
Yeah.
But a lot of times the credibility, they want the position. Oh, we did it.
Yes.
We did that.
Yes.
But every day, how many of us saw so many beefs, like you said? You know what I'm saying? How many saw so many beefs long before the odds found all that shit won't even get counted date?
Exactly.
You know what I'm
So
saying?
that's what I'm saying. The micro level to me is more important than this macro level that we say. I'm not saying the Iron Sky is a bad thing. We're talking about the good and the bad of it. But what I'm saying is, I don't understand why there's never the investment first into the community, into community folks like Antoine and you, Jason, who have people's ears, who can talk to young men. The investment is always on this level, whereas, okay, we can lock them up, we can watch them, we can help police, the same process. And it comes from slave patrols.
Right. But
it's finding people, bringing them out, and putting them in jail.
But the problem again, I have to put it back
accountability.
on. Well, no. Accountability of these folks and the constituency that represents these folks. You got to remember, and I preach this all the time. Those that have issues with the schools are not the voter base. The ones that are the voter base, their children don't go to public school. They go to private schools. So they care less about little Pookie, little Peanut, little Ray Ray. They care less about them failing or succeeding in the school system. The ones that are perpetuating the industrial prison complex, those voters are saying, lock them up.
Yes.
And I'm willing to spend a third of the budget or more to do so.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So the problem is, and this is something that I talked to Yolanda about. Technically, there are more of us, brothers like myself, like him, if there's more of us, Queen. And if we would stand up and do the right thing as far as moving these people out of place that don't represent the disenfranchised, that don't represent our neighborhoods, that don't represent our cause and issues, we can get those frontline issues resolved. Because at the end of the day, that money that goes into general funds is out of your pocket, our pocket. Reason why is because that money comes out of property taxes.
Yeah.
That landlord is not taking that money out of his pocket and paying property taxes. He's paying property taxes out of your rent, out of my rent. So that money is going into the general fund. That's our money. So if we would assume our power, and our power is to take over, there's more of us than there are them. If we stood up, there's easily 200,000 disenfranchised black men and women right here in Baltimore City, that if we exercised our right to vote, we push everybody out in every city council district, take control of the Board of Estimates, as well as what's going on in City Hall and the mayoral's office, and this city would be cleaned up in 4 years. 4 years. And if that person doesn't do right by us, that we appointed, the next 4 years you go and we put another person in there. But we're not assuming.
That was the blueprint right there.
But we're not assuming our power. We're not assuming. We're not assuming our power. You know what I mean? We got to step up. And again, the ones that are controlling what you see, the dynamics, I say the dynamics goes back hundreds of years. Because I'm saying that ever since Lord Baltimore came into Baltimore City, folks of color have never been given an opportunity to succeed in this city. And only a few, the Boulets, and we know who the Boulets are. We know who those certain affluent groups, many of them live in places like Ashburton and some of the more affluent black communities. They've been given opportunities, but only to a certain extent, while everybody else suffers in the process.
Okay.
We have to understand that our power lies by taking over the governance and the control of our city. Again, there's more of us than there are them.
Got you, Jason. So we heard about policing, we talked about Eye in the Sky, and we got a blueprint tonight. I think this has been this is a great conversation. We must continue. I want us all to give like a solution, and we get ready to get out here. I want everybody to say, okay, listen, this is what I think for this process, and then we're gonna come and do this. We're gonna come together again and see how that works out. Ray, you want to be first?
Well, I think the bottom line is Baltimore City is in the position that it's in because of oppressive, racist, criminal justice system that's been created to kind of hold black people back for a lot of years. The consent decree clearly outlined what happened and what needs to happen. I don't think the first and potential solution should be more enforcement, more incarceration, when it's clearly identified that the impacted population didn't create the environment that they live in. It was imposed upon them, and we're spending millions of dollars enforcing laws caused by crimes of poverty on people that have been forced into poverty. So invest more in undoing the systemic oppression that created this situation, so in turn there will be less people being arrested, less people turning to the streets, and less people getting killed, instead of finding more technically advanced methods of arresting black folk.
Love it. Twan?
Really? Yeah, like Ray said, like it has to be hope there, you know, and it has to be opportunities that present hope to people so they can know strategically that they can make it. You know, part of like certain budget pieces of costing for people that's in prison for years and life sentences, they may not never get out. Thirds of that money could be used and invested in communities for those kids that's in the house that's 5 and 6 now, that's gonna be out here in 10 years. You know, and this process can change if that start now. For those coming out, those things to be there, and we can have a better, greater city, and we definitely gotta vote. We gotta understand, educate, liberate, you know what I'm saying, and change the community, and basically have invested leaders in the community from out of here in policy that plays a direct part in those communities' poverty to say that I'm gonna make it upscale so it can be on a equal level.
Love it. Jason?
So I'm gonna end up on this same thing that, you know, you keep criticizing me about it is accountability. You know, we have to have accountability for our own actions. You know, a man can't go up in you if you ain't bent over and spread out and standing there waiting to receive him.
That's real
so you
talk.
sit there, you talk about racism, you sit there, you talk about the economics, you talk about the environment, but when do we take control where we have power at to change those conditions? We have the power. What we need to do is make sure that we're supporting people like, for instance, Yolanda Pulley for the mayor's office. Because this is a people-tician. This is somebody that we know that will go in there, hold the system accountable,
She's on
and make sure.
because she's not here today.
Well, but we representing her in spirit.
All day,
you know?
all day. That's my girl.
But again, we have to put real people that represent our interests.
True.
You know what I mean? You know, the same old guard, that nepotism, you know, that rule that has taken place for many decades. Like I said, going back hundreds of years, to me, when you really look at it, we need to understand that power and take control of that power. There's more of us than there are of them. I mean, many of us have fought, for instance, for just simple things like being able to give him the right to vote. So he has a say now. Whereas before he was disenfranchised and the system looked for every way to disenfranchise him. But now he's empowered.
Yes.
And so we need to understand that power, get everybody together and say, okay, enough is enough. It's a new day dawning. These two, you know, Brandon won the primary by 29%, 43,000 votes. There's more of us than that.
Yeah.
There was 100,000 black men and women that were arrested right here in Baltimore City that had to go through the system. Many of them had to deal with re-entry issues coming home. Many of them lost their lives in the process through mass incarceration. So we have to understand, if there's 100,000 of them, imagine if we came 100,000 to them polls and said enough is enough. The next politician that we put in is going to represent our issues, and we're going to work on the front end of things and not on the residual effect of things. So that's my thing. Again, accountability for us. I'm accountable for my own actions. And that's how I stand. So, and I love you, Queen, for the opportunity.
All right.
baby!
All right, so we at
Love
10,
this.
what's the day, guys? It's 10 what? 20?
10:28.
So it's 10:28:30. We're in front of City Hall. Black Box Radio. We had an excellent discussion tonight, and we're gonna come together. We're gonna discuss this again. You got 10 more days with Design the Sky, right? No,
No, 4 more days.
4 more days. The 31st.
31st.
So we're gonna talk about this again.
31st.
So listen, thank you guys. I really appreciate y'all.
Thank you.
Ray.
Well, thanks a lot.
All right, Black Box Radio. We boxed up. Can I get them deuces, bro?
Box.
Box. We out.
Peace out.
Peace.